joined us. Where else can you see the starting line from your luncheon table, for heaven's sakes? So let's see, right off the bat, we want to acknowledge some special guests in the room, staff Commodores. I see Bruce Monroe, who's always got good questions. Bruce, nice to see you here. And we see Mr. Merv himself, the man Shenson. Merv Shenson, welcome, sir. How many years young are you now, Merv?
95.
He's only 95, yes. And we see Paul Heineken. Paul, welcome. And we see Kimball Livingston. Kimball, thank you, buddy. Nice to see Kimball here as well. And we see Steve the Bone Taft is here too. He was here at the time. Let's see, looking around the room. Hans Troinfels, who was also chairman of the board. He's in my next list. I don't think I missed any staff Commodores. Now, we also have a rear Commodore, Pamela Healy. Pam, welcome. And we have some former chairmen of the board, including Hans Troinfels and Carolyn Patrick. And I'm looking around the room. A great service to be chairmen of the board. And we have online former chairman of the board, Paul Cayard. Paulo, welcome from San Diego, buddy. Let's see, this is a very, very historic event that we're going to talk about, because everybody knows that the first challenge for the America's Cup from San Francisco was our own Golden Gate Challenge from this yacht club back in the 80s. So I'm going to give you a little bit of historic context, and we have several sailors in the room, and so we're going to be calling on them during the presentation, but I want to introduce them at this point too. So right off the bat, we have my co-chair for the event and the director of onshore operations, and really the guy who built and supervised the construction of the first two America's Cup boats for the first syndicate from San Francisco, Kenny Keefe. Kenny, welcome, buddy. All these years. Hank the Man Stewart is trying to get on our call right now. Just a second here. Hank, it started right now. Let me send a note to you. Hold on here. Hold on here. Sorry, guys. This is how it is in the age of all these things. Here, let's see. Share contact. I have to send this to the online producer so he can make sure he gets this guy on. Add Hank. So, we also have the daughter of our skipper and the charismatic leader of the Golden Gate Challenge, Lisa Blackaller. Lisa, welcome. Lisa was an active member of our campaign. She was just a young kid, but she was the pride of Tommy, and she turned out to be super, super, super valuable and a great member of our team here and when we got down to Australia. And also, we have the guy who earned the bow position on our boat, incredibly good bow guy. And then, as it turned out, his pop would get a terminal illness back in the States. And the very end of the campaign, after him doing a brilliant job in the bow, we had to let go of, tearfully, Scotty Eastham. Scotty, welcome, buddy. Scotty's gone on to become a great rigger, great bow guy, and a great bow guy, and a great man on the boat all the way around, and a trimmer, starboard trimmer as well. We have Hank Stewart on the call, or we should have Hank Stewart on the call. He was starboard trimmer, and we also have here the port trimmer, Russ Silvestri. Russ, welcome, buddy. After Scotty came home, another young Turk earned his slot, and that is Tommy Ducharme. Tommy, welcome, buddy. All these guys went on to sail in many other great boats over time. And you're thinking to yourself, well, gee, don't we have BMW engines like they had in the America's Cup in Valencia? Don't we have on these boats really powerful, electricity so we can push buttons and get the winches coming? No, we didn't. We had horsepower as in the form of human beings. One of whom is with us today, the starboard handles, Jeff Litvin. Jeff, buddy. Jeff and Brad Lewis were on the handles, basically coffee grinding constantly. And if you thought that it was easy sailing a boat in breeze in San Francisco Bay, just imagine doing that in the Indian Ocean off the east shore of Australia. Speaking of which, we knew right away that to tow boats out at all 12 meters, racing 12 meters, don't have engines on them at all. So everywhere you go with your racing boat, you've got to have a tender take you there. And taking a tender, being on a tow, imagine being on a 150-foot tow line in 5, 6, sometimes 10-foot waves. Try that one on. So we knew we needed an amazing tender driver. And so we lucked out and picked from the red and white fleet here, we picked Mick Beatty, and Mick's wife, Susie, is here. Susie, welcome here, representing Mick Beatty. We needed to tell our story, and in order to tell our story, we needed video, and in order to have video, we needed Vince Castellina. Vince, where are you? Vince Castellina, videographer for the challenge, was here. Let's see. Oh, yeah. What about navigating? Blackaller said to me, look, Ron, if you can raise the $10 million, you can be the navigator. But in Belvin, I have a real sailor. How about Craig Healy? Craig, it's a true story. We only raised $8.7 million, so that never did happen. But Greg was a gifted and brilliant navigator on the boat. And, of course, the tactician on the boat, as you all know, was Paul Cayard. But what you might not know is that around October 85, Blackaller and I had a meeting, and he said, you know, the crew is a lot younger than me, and we want to keep getting ones that are even younger. And I'm really not the right guy to be, you know, the manager of the crew. And I think the guy we should pick is Paul Cayard to be crew chief. And so, Paul, welcome again, buddy. He was actually crew chief, demonstrating early the executive skills that we've seen him exercise all around the world, running giant big programs and raising loads of dough and being our own chairman of the board. Now, as I look around the room, I want to make sure there's nobody else that was on the boat that I did not. Chewy! Oh, absolutely, Chewy, Chewbacca. Absolutely, Jim Waters. Good on you, Chewbacca, as well. So Kenny would do the middle of the boat, the pit, and we had multiple other people who would work at the mast and, you know, the strong guys. And if Chewy stands up, you'll see why Chewy was one of the great, powerful guys on the boat. Recently, I was moving sails in Jim Lucier's boat, and about 6 of us got underneath this mainsail and brought this new mainsail to the boat. And somebody said, Jeff Thorpe said, so you're doing this like the 12 meters, huh? And that's actually what happened. We would move the sails onto the boat and move the sails off the boat with muscle power, and so there was lots of need for muscle power. So with all those introductions out of the way, let's go through our program here. So we kicked off the whole Golden Gate Challenge. And by the way, in '83, Bob Scott, a very entrepreneurial former IBM sales guy in the Bay Area with an office in Sausalito, he basically quickly put down some dough and then went around the bar and raised 10 grand. And in the next 2 years, that's what they had, $10,000. And they kept saying we're a challenge. And then pretty soon, Bob Cole, seated in the far left of this picture, and Blackaller and I were in a meeting. And I said to Cole, if we really had to start the effort right today, because he and Blackaller were saying, if we don't get a boat under construction, we'll never make it in time. How would you get the money if you had $1 million right now? And the car dealer, Bob Cole, said, flooring allowance. It's a hilarious answer because it has nothing to do with yachting, it has nothing to do with a genuine line of credit. And then he would use the cars on his floor to get money from the manufacturers. And I said, how much can you get? He said, 800 grand. And Kevin O'Connell was in the meeting and he said, that'll do. And so with that agreement by Bob Cole, we dispatched Kevin to go up to Stockton and start construction on the first of 2 12 meters. We then held a meeting here after we got the first boat done, and the boat was 5 months late from Stockton, and we held this press conference, and you can see it's a real rogues gallery here. From the left to the closest to me right here is Bob Cole himself, and then just past me is Cyril Magnan. Cyril Magno was Mr. San Francisco, and he had more connections than you could even imagine. And to the left of him was the then mayor, Dianne Feinstein, and then Tommy, and then Gary Mull, and then, let's see here, I'm going to walk over here so I can get a better view. After Mull, I think we're going to have Alberto. Yeah, Alberto, oh no, Heiner Meldner, then Gary Mull, then Alberto Calderon. Heiner Meldner died about 4 years ago, Gary many more years than that ago, and Alberto Calderon just died a few months ago, like a month and a half ago. There is Kenny the Man Keefe sitting at the table right here, and Phil Keiko is right over here. So anyway, we held this press conference, and at first we thought, well, on what basis are we holding this press conference? But we said the first challenge from San Francisco was underway, and there was interest. The press literally filled up the Golden Gate room, and we were off to the races. We said to them, we're going to go racing at the far corners of the planet, meaning the other side of Australia. And we said, you know, there's this little town called Fremantle at the end of the river going up to Perth. And so we said, even though it's way over there, you want to come. It's kind of like Sausalito meets Martinez. And then we basically sent Jim Taylor, who shouldn't be on the call, I don't see him yet, Jim Taylor off to Australia, and he basically set up the beginnings of our compound. And Kenny, I'm going to pass the mic. Walter, where's Walter? Pass the mic to Kenny. Would you describe our compound in Fremantle, please, Kenny Keefe?
So, to start with, we wanted to have it secure. We're in Newport, Rhode Island. All the boats were hanging and anybody could see them. Everybody could see the boats. And with the
For the camera.
where is the camera?
Yeah, right here.
Right there?
Yeah.
There you go. I'll figure it out. Anyway, so the first thing was to build a secure compound, which nobody else had. So when the boat came in the pen, there was a hinged door down the bottom of the floor of the bay, and we crank it up tight, and then we haul the boat out, and then there were curtains all around. Then we put down a false floor within the bay so that we would work on the boat. And that was the biggest part of our boat operation. And then with Chewy, we built our own sail loft, elevated the floor, had sewing pits, and we could basically do whatever we wanted with the sails to the point where we could buy blank sails and finish them off in Australia with Chewy and his team.
Okay, come up, say some. Great. Okay, yeah, right up here. Okay, so the new boat, we christened the new boat, and everybody jumps to want to be in the picture. So this is a hilarious picture. Silvestri, how old are you in this picture? Come on up here for a second, would you please? Come on up here. How old are you in this picture? Silvestri is right in the front row. He likes the front row. This is 1986. This is February 11, 85. You're 25 years old.
25-year-old, yeah.
And you're a dean. Where are you at this point?
Nowhere.
Nowhere.
Well, for sure, you didn't deserve to be on a 12-meter. So we didn't let you tail for 6 months. You had to grind for the first 6 months until you learn to respect your grinders. It is true. Especially about the point you being lost.
Okay, so what were we about to do? We would do two boats. Can we go back? Yeah, you can. So we decided we would build two boats. We said we'll build an E1 boat, an evolutionary boat, which would be a standard at that point, a winged keel 12-meter, and then we would build a revolutionary boat. And we didn't tell anybody what that meant, but they basically kind of doubtfully looked at it and said, yeah, revolutionary, like, what about it? So the top above the waterline, it looked like a normal 12-meter, but we hid everything below the waterline, and you can see this now, but nobody got to see this until we put the boat in the water in August, except for there were some spies. We're going to get to those in a minute. So we then got a bunch of press about what we did, and what we did was we created a multidiscipline design team. We had learned what happened in Australia. I mean, by Australia too. Australia too had used Joop Sloof in the Netherlands tank. He's an aerodynamicist, and he talked about tip vortexes and how a wing keel would be better than a traditional keel. And so we basically created our own little mini team with Mull being the kind of like referee and naval architect, and knew the rule backwards and forwards. Told me the rule better than anybody. And then Heiner Meldner, who was a computational physicist with 2 PhDs, one in math and one in physics, and Alberto Calderon, whom I mentioned just passed away recently. And Alberto had written a paper in '61 about using a ring, you remember that, and then basically having a forward foil and a geek to separate the functions of what had been a winged keel. But we had this idea in our heads, and just after we hired these guys, we had a creative session in Blackaller's place in Emeryville. Kenny was there. It was Kenny, me, Blackaller, Alberto, Gary, Heiner, one or two other folks, and talk about that, a little creative session.
Well, the first issue we had, as Mr. Paul Cayard remembered, is the black-collar family is not necessarily overly flexible. And what came out of '83 was Australia 2 was 44 feet 3 inches long on the waterline. And Tom's was not going to listen to anything but a 44-foot 3-inch boat. But Paul had been down sailing in 12-meter worlds, and Paul and I were pretty convinced we need a longer boat. So after we started building 61, we called directors up and we cut the boat in half, and we put 8 inches in the middle of the boat. And Tom, just, did how it was.
Not your typical.
Exactly. Maybe we should have put foot in respect, but that was one of our projects. But during that meeting that Ron's talking about, Tom and I are sitting each other and we're listening to this, and I said to the designers, well, that means we put the mast in the middle of the boat. And the whole room got quiet. Because they were telling us it didn't matter where the center of pressure was below the waterline, because you just changed the angle of one of the rudders. And they kind of agreed, and a week later they called Tom and I back and said, no, not right. There's an optimal rudder angle front and back, and the mast needs to go in the same spot as every other boat. But those were the discussions that we were having. We weren't into basic sailboat design being length and if we should do anything with draft or something like that. Scott and I were just talking about Dennis's new 6-meter that's taking a displacement penalty. But what we're focused on is just where the center pressure is going to be below the waterline, and how is it to match up with the aero package, which was pretty revolutionary for those days, in discussions we just never really had. And it was from those meetings that the decision was made that we better build a test boat, or else just to prove this thing can work.
So to keep our secret, we chose to pick code words for the boat parts. We didn't want to call it a bulb, too obvious what it meant, so we called it the Geek, and we didn't call the forward rudder, we called it trim tab. And we basically sent off Jim Michael to go to London. We gave him, his only price was he wanted a round trip first class on the Concorde. We agreed to that, and Jim Michael, former Commodore of this yacht club, went to London and argued our case. Now we have Paul Cayard, 7-time world champion, many times since then America's Cup sailor, and before that sailed in '83 on Paul's Defender Courageous Syndicate. So Paul, can you describe what the first time you heard that we would be putting a boat in the water, the whole bow rudder idea? Can you please talk about that for a bit?
Well, first, hey, Ron and everybody. First, let me just say I'm sorry not to be there. It seems like an awesome reunion, and I love everybody. And really, the thought that comes to my mind first before I get into the technical side is just what a great opportunity the Golden Gate Challenge was for all of us. I mean, Russ was 25, I was 27, even Kenny was one of the older ones. He was 30. Tom trusted us, and he put a lot of faith and he put a lot of responsibility on our shoulders. And I would like to think that he picked pretty well, because we weren't going to let him down, but it was quite a big load for everybody. It was a short-handed challenge, so everybody was doing a little bit of everything, and I'm sure we're going to get into it, but like our short team, Cause Machine and Jono and all those guys were just building new rudders every night. Chris Rand was building new gearing. So anyway, before I get into any details, I just want to say that big picture, it was an awesome opportunity, that the United States lost the America's Cup. St. Francis could challenge. If you look at all the people that you've named and pretty much were on the team, we were pretty local. And a lot of strength, a lot of great, an America's Cup program is like getting a PhD for a sailor. And what you learn scientifically to back up your intuitions as a young sailor is super valuable. So, nowadays, the sailors are from New Zealand that sail the America's Cup, our American team, it's a different world. So the opportunity that you, Ron, and Tom, and R.C. Keefe, and Bob Cole gave us was fundamental in all our careers. And that's a great gift, and I'm super happy that we all had that. As far as the question about the boat, I came a little late to the challenge, honestly. I think
Right.
Kenny and Tom started quite a bit earlier. I came there around January of '86.
Yeah, exactly. We had a crew beginning then, and that's why we wanted you to be the chief of the crew. Exactly.
Yeah, I had done the Worlds in Australia in January of '86 with Gucci and Rod Davis and Mike Topa. We all sailed that boat. So it was a very valuable experience. And I heard about the R1, and I think the first time I really got a glimpse of it, I flew to San Diego. Probably still had PSA back then. And Alberto Calderon picked me up at the airport. He had like this old station wagon.
Woody.
And he pulls up at the curb, and he's got the rudder of the boat mounted on the hood.
This is true.
He goes, yeah, I like to drive around like this because then I can test the rudders when I'm driving. And I'm looking at this guy, and I'm thinking, man, this is really out there. And he's driving down the road back to Point Loma. I think we were going to sail the Soling or something. And he says, and I'm saying, he's looking at it. He says that he had the controls in on the dashboard. He could add camber, take camber out. There's telltales all over the thing. And I said, yeah, but Alberto, some of the time you look at the road, right? Yeah, so that's my group. That's the R1.
Great. So we have on the line also an early member of our campaign. He later on got a better offer. That is to say, Gary Jobson was part of our deal until ESPN said, no, you would be an excellent TV commentator, to which Gary said yes and went on to win multiple Emmys. Gary, welcome to our call. Tell us about the very beginnings. You were there for Defender Courageous in '83, and you saw Courageous get faster than Defender, and then you were part of the starting of the original 12-meter campaign here. And so talk to us about your first impressions when we first were beginning, and then when you heard about the bow-rudder idea. And welcome to the call, Gary.
Well, just like Paul and Ken and the others, I'm a big fan and continue to be of our late friend Tom Blackaller. And I was Tom's Tactician Cup in 1983 aboard the fastest 12-meter ever built Defender in 6 seconds less than beyond that, it was terrible.
Apologies to Mr. Pedrick.
Tom, like Dennis Conner, realized that it was a technological battle and it was time to do something new, and the status quo of the 12-meter needed to be a lot different. And with Alberto and Heiner and others, they, to go off in a different direction was a bold move, correct move. And it certainly paid off well, and I think it's fair to say the team played its way into shape. Maybe not the best early, but got better as time on, and frankly, almost pulled it off. I've long said at USA, about 30 more days, I won the whole thing.
Thank you. Yes. And starboard trimmer, who was the one who got us first out of the sporting section and onto page 6 in the Chronicle, because we were tacking out here in a competition with Buddy Melgis in Canada, and on a tack from starboard tack onto port tack, the starboard, then in those days were wired, jib sheet got a little loose and hit Hank the Jig Stewart in the right eye, and blood all over the place. And I dispatched our rib to go get him and take him to the hospital. And wouldn't you know, that happened to get to the newspaper, because if it bleeds, it leads. And so we got out of the sporting section and began to be news in San Francisco. Hank the Jig Stewart, talk to us about the beginnings of the program from your view as a member of the sailing crew.
Well, Ron, I want to thank everybody for being there, and it was a great privilege to be a part of the Golden Gate Challenge. That day that I heard on the bay, you were very excited. I remember you called me next morning and wanted to know if I could do it again. And I said, no, thank you. Just one time is enough. But the beginning of the program was a lot of fun for me. I got there pretty early. I was involved with Kenny and Tom in the thought process of putting together the Soling, the initial small boat that was the Omega project that tested the idea of a twin rudder and Geek concept. And it was just a tremendous time to be there. I was a little bit older than Paul, a little bit younger than Kent, and just a wonderful, wonderful time to be there. So it was great. Thanks.
So one of the things we used Hank for is, I think Paul and I went to Tom trying to get him a little calmed down and said, Tom, don't you think that our designer should be able to sail a boat? So that's a good idea, I guess. Why don't you teach him? So Hank and I took Alberto sailing, Alberto sailing in a Soling, and he came with his raccoon skin cap thing, with a little thing off the back. And we're sailing along, and Alberto says, I don't really understand what a brooch is. I said, Hank, we're going to have to show him a brooch. Off of Alcatraz, on an uptide day, we showed him what a brooch is. And Hank and I wanted to do it right. Not really realizing that actually a Soling tips over, and we had to be rescued by the Coast Guard and come back in with our designer. I think that's the last time everyone said.
So, exactly. So, Diego, put back the slides if you wouldn't mind, please, and we'll go to the next slide. Here we go, Diego. There we go. Presentation mode. You see if I can go down here. There we go. Okay. Okay, here we go. All right, so we have these code names, and we get the boat over in Anderson's boat yard, and we start fairing the bulb and like crazy. And we put a box, like a 10-foot. How tall was that? The box inside of the big yard, like 8 foot tall and 15 feet long and like 8 feet wide. And guys would go in there and fair the lead. Talk a little bit about that process, Kenny.
Well, a slide before that that's a little bit more important. Alberto comes up one day, and we got both boats in the yard, and we're behind an R1 trying to get ready to go, and Alberto says, Ken, can I talk to you? Yeah. Well, can you come out and look at this other boat? And he says, is this like the boat we're building? I said, yeah, that's like the boat we're building. In other words, we're going to have 2 reps. Well, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. No.
An Alberto moment.
So we were sponsored by Pac Bell. I think you organized.
Yeah.
And we had some of the first Pac Bell phones. Right, it was on a bat.
That's right.
In the thing.
Early cell phones by Pac Bell. That's
And
right.
basically, Tom and I, there were a couple, but Tom and I were connected. So I dialed up. I think it was Blackaller. Just hit it, and I said, Tom, I really need to talk to this guy. So Alberto talked to him for a while. And then you can tell Tom's not so happy in the other end of the phone. And he gives the phone back, Alberto gives the phone back to him, and he said, Kenneth, don't ever do that again. As we go forward, Alberto was actually right. The first day we went sailing, we broached before we got the mainsail. We couldn't get the boat to go straight. And then we started to understand the balance problems and the things that we needed to deal with. And then Alberto was trying to explain to us, but that we just couldn't process. We just didn't know.
It was also new.
Yeah, exactly.
So we didn't really know that we had a brilliant idea at the time, but we knew that we could keep a secret, it would get more exciting. So believe it or not, we actually did a press conference in a boatyard. This is it right here. And in the middle of the press conference, we didn't show them anything, but at one point when they were super interested, I had this guard close the door. And that made the press all the more interested. And they were all excited because they didn't know what we were doing. So we basically were this little late to start, underfunded, scrappy syndicate from San Francisco with this whole idea, and we had to get energy around us any way we could.
And with Russ Ventry's friend, John Bertrand of America, up on the hill in Marin City, shooting in over 101 with this long-range camera funded by the New York friggin' Yacht Club, which we don't have cars, but anyway.
Spies.
And they're spying on us, and he had a perfect long-range run where he could get over Ron's 8 or 10-foot wall and actually see what's going on. And since then, John reports that they've got the front rudder.
Yeah.
And we'll go on as we go through the day.
Exactly. So, we pretty soon we see in this little fax newsletter that's going around the world called America's Cup Update. They're writing, San Francisco's got a bow rudder, San Francisco's got a bow rudder, and New York's got a rib out here, and they're taking pictures like crazy. And so we don't exactly know how do we get attention again. They know what we're up to. So I think it was Kenny who had the idea, or maybe it was Scotty. Come up, please, Scotty, up here. And so what happens is we're going to ship the boat in August to Australia, and I asked Scott, is there anything we can do to hide the fact we got a bow rudder? And Kenny says, sure, I'll close up the hole. And Scotty then says, and I'll put a skirt around the whole top of the gunnel cap of the boat and hang it down. And as we're lifting it up, I organized a press conference of all the press looking at this very picture. As it comes up, Scotty has monofilament line on the top of the canvas, and it drops down as if by accident. Scott, pick it from there.
Well, the problem was that when we went to lift the boat, it didn't let the water out of the bag. So we were about to drop our skirt right in front of everybody. And so I think I was on the deck of the ship, and we see the problem. And so I take off my shirt, as much as my clothing that I dare, over the side of the ship, and I'm in the water, and so I'm slicing the bottom of the bag to let the water out of the bottom of the bag in what had to be flesh-eating water down there. So the Benny Bridge was horrible. But I think I got pushed, actually. Got pushed in the water.
Well, that's perfect for our next point, because our crew, as you can tell as you hear the story, were actually part of the construction crew, the sailing crew. Everybody was basically on one big giant team. And no matter what would happen, we all basically were doing everything we could. I was raising money as fast as I could, and they were spending it as fast as they could.
Go back one slide. So you see there, underneath the other tarp,
Oh, perfect, yeah.
is the wing keel. And what we did is we built a piece of plywood to simulate a wing keel, and you can see it kind of pushing out in the lower corner of the blue tarp there.
This is the corner right here he's talking about. If you look at it, this is a bulge that Kenny deliberately put in here. I think the modern term is disinformation.
So, Ron, if you just showed there where the bow rudder would be,
Yeah, the bow rudder would be right here.
and we fiberglassed over the hole and painted it, we just didn't do a patch. You completely fared in so you can see it.
In other words, there's no trace whatsoever of the bow rudder, which caused this thing called America's Cup Update that said a UPI, I had UPI shoot this too, so we had worldwide coverage. No bow rudder, no bow rudder. Around the world, it was a UPI wire photo, literally around the world, which is just exactly what we wanted. We got back in the news and tricked everybody like crazy that we didn't actually have a bow rudder.
So we, in that picture, the other thing early in the design was we needed to make a decision of the diameter of the rudder post so we could weld in the lower rudder support in them both. and we picked 10 inches, thinking that a normal 12-meter rudder is 4 inches in diameter. So we went to 10 inches, and it turned out that when he did the first calculations, that 10 inches wasn't enough, and we ended up with a bearing that was 4 to 6 millimeters all the way around. As part of our hurdle and just having to make decisions on a tight timeline.
The whole steering mechanism on the boat was completely pioneering because nobody had ever had a bow rudder before. So Kenny and the team went through a whole series of iterations where we had long rods that went the length of the boat, and we had, where you could have both rudders going the same. We call that collective, or we had cyclical when they went opposite each other, and we had all these theories in our head. And so the first time we sailed the boat, and we're going to come to that picture in just a minute. Let me jump ahead to that picture. Well, I'll wait till I get there. So, anyway, so the whole crew is one big giant thing. Chewy's leading all the sail making. We had Steve Taft here in San Francisco representing North for us, and we would give Steve an order, and he would say, "When are you going to pay us?" And we'd say, "We want to give you another order, Steve." And he'd say, "That's great, but what about the last order?" We'd say, "Well, we got the sales. That's great. Everything's good, Steve." So anyway, we were very shoestring.
In the picture of the team there in Australia, there were two interesting things. One is that Paul brought it up, that if you start with Doc Healy in the back of the boat, it was really a San Francisco team and a St. Francis team. It's pretty cool from that standpoint. We went sailing the first day, and we turned the boat, and we saw when turbulence was coming off the forward rudder when you were turning fast on pre-start. We realized that was a little bit of an issue. So one of the things we developed that Doc Healy took care of was we moved the pivot point on the center steering system piece, and we put an Amtech hydraulic ram on top of that quadrant so we could move the pivot point in and out. And then we could turn the front rudder 3 times as fast as the back rudder for pre-start maneuver.
And in other words, at a different ratio, which was revolutionary, us iterating on the idea, oh yeah, we'll make the front rudder turn more sharply than the aft rudder, and they kept constantly dickering with this. Kenny would say, wait, I just got 3 inches, now you want 2.5. And so we were constantly in the yard screwing with the boat.
So Paul remembered this, and Hank, we got to a point in the program where we had to make sure we were on time when we're going to dock out, and we're going to do things on a schedule and do it on time. And Tom would come and preach to us that this is what we're going to do. And perfect, actually the way to run the program. On the day of the picture was going to be at 10 in the morning, whatever day or whatever time it was. So everybody's there except for Tom. So Paul, being the leader that he is and the team builder, says, we're going to show him.
What's that?
Took the picture without Tom, the team picture. An hour later, Tom wanders in, and he's only had some unimportant meeting, like raising money or something like that. Was not so happy. I blame Cayard, and we took the picture again.
So working 12 hours, 15 hours, the breaks were really, really important. And this is not a GQ page. This is actually our crew at the time with this has all been photoshopped to make them look younger. But the moments of relaxation were really, really, really important. Jeff Litfin, you still have that sweater. I see you can still wear it. I can see that right here. Jeff, come up and talk to us a little bit. No, Jeff. Jeff's. This is a fun thing. So Bruce the Sheik Epke, in making humor on the deal, basically hung Hank Stewart's kids up on like they were work clothes because we're all about work here. So this is a typical kind of a prank that we were playing inside to keep everybody's head, lighthearted and stuff like that. Now, I mentioned the first time, I'm going to go back for a second here. When we look at this boat, the first time we sailed a prototype of it, The first time we saw the prototype was in Antioch. We started in the dark. Blacker and I arrived at like 5:30 or something a.m. And Kenny is there, and Hank the Jig Stewart is there, and all the way up there, we're driving in. I have a 500 SCC fast car at the time, and we're driving up 580, and I got to turn left to go on this next road, and it's this really big curve, big long fast curve, and Blackaller is screaming at me, faster, 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 and I'm going real fast. I don't want to tell you how fast, and I begin to let off a little bit, like halfway through the turn. No, goddammit, faster, faster! The Germans go these cars for speed. Jesus Christ, don't you respect them? Anyway, we get up there, we get on this boat, and it's dark, and it's a Soling prototype, and we bring Tommy Ducharme with us, and so Tommy and Blackaller and I are sailing this thing around, and we've got two rudders, one on top of the other. Kenny's organized so the bow rudder has a different tiller, two tillers, I mean, and each tiller controls one of the rudders, and all the way as we're sailing around, it was like this amazing thing. Tommy, come up here for a second and talk about the first time you got on this boat. Walter Hinn, Tommy Ducharme, this microphone, bring his cane. Tommy Ducharme, the bow guy, on the boat with us. Come up here, Tommy, so we can see in the camera.
I'm Dad. Good luck. Just keep on doing.
So here we are. We get on this boat. We did it in the dark so nobody could see us. We put it in the lift. I think Scotty was there. You, Hank, the Jig Stewart. They put the boat in the water in the dark so nobody could see it. Okay, so Tommy, we talk about the first time that we sailed the boat. It's a prototype.
Control in a two-tiller multi-directional deal is very challenging, as you might imagine. And the boat couldn't go straight sometimes. It would go straight sometimes. It would stop. You couldn't get it going. It's hard to tack sometimes. As Jim Taylor would say, spins on a dime and leaves 9 cents change. It was always a challenge. That boat was a challenge to do. And side note is I worked with Alberto Calderon in the 92 America's Cup, and he was just as wingnutty as he was this last time. And this boat was absolutely amazing to reach out there. And then we tried a version of this, but it was a boat that looked like that, where my palm was the keel, and then we had two fins holding up the keel.
Twin flyer.
And the New Zealanders actually made it work. Dennis didn't like it. He just didn't have any feel, but it was a cool experience too. And thanks to Kenny, because he taught me a lot about how to make a steering system work, and it was a good experience. So
When you look at that profile picture, one of the early decisions we made was to put the front rudder as far forward as possible because it needed less angle, thus less drag, to create the same lift. The problem with it is it's in the next picture.
We're going to show it.
When it's not in the water, it's a problem.
Yeah.
And then the whole balance goes off because now the amount of lift you have or resistance to side force has changed, right? And that picture right there was not in any of the calculations.
So we lost the effectiveness of the bow rudder when it came on the water, obviously. And Perth, of all the venues to race in, had the bumpiest seas. I mean, it wouldn't be like the same as racing in Lake Garda or someplace smoother. This was like a crazy-ass place for us to deploy the first ever bow rudder.
So one of the things that in some of the boats with Cayards now, the bow rudder is farther back just so it's completely immersed. It's actually smaller and completely immersed.
And we're going to show the New Zealand boat that Tommy just referred to later on in the slideshow. Great.
That did work with swell in San Diego. So it was not a top, it was a swell. So it worked a lot better.
Exactly. Perfect.
Thank you, Tommy.
One of the interesting things Paul might remember is at the time Paul's father-in-law, Pelly Pedersen, came down to Australia and spent some time with us. And Pelly obviously designed the St. Francis 6 meters and a lot of them other than Gary. And Pelly's looking at the whole thing. He says, "Take that damn thing out." And we all kind of looked at it. It probably wasn't, it would have been an interesting experiment because we had enough side force in the boat from other ways, but Tom said it was not an option.
So we talked about the big waves. If you got big waves, getting pulled out on a tender was a really, really, really scary ass thing to do. You know, we're up on the top of a wave and the bow gets pulled down by the tender and all that sort of stuff. So this is a shot of Mick and Susie and their kid Hogan Beatty, whom I've had the pleasure of sailing with in the America's Cup 217 down in Bermuda. We lost a headstay on the J-boat Svea, and literally as I jump up and let the traveler drop down, there's 26,000 pounds of the main she carries, the boom flies up like this, and I yell, it's the headstay, halyard forward, and literally as I'm saying that, Hogan Beatty has jumped already ahead of me saying it at the mast and is running forward with 2 halyards, he and another guy, and they put halyards in and we saved the mast on the J-boat, 144-foot boat, because of the skill that the young Hogan Beatty, seen here at age 16, demonstrated.
I think Susie was really happy that Hogan was down there by himself with all the guys learning all the important things.
Life as a single man.
Yeah, well,
Hey, so it was also the case that it's not like go forward and change, you do a peel or something, change out. Let's go to number 3. It's getting a little breezy. This is what it looked like from the back of the boat. And Blackaller used to constantly say he can't see the dog on the front of the boat. If you can see the front of the boat, it'd be all that better. But there's always somebody in the way between him and the front of the boat. But this is just a scene from the back of the boat, and this is a guy lounging around after the race. You see, this is Russ there with a red cap, and you see Stevie Erickson, I think, up there, and Cayard's got his shirt off, and this is coming back in, and this makes another point. After the racing, everybody was exhausted, but this wasn't the end of the day. And one of the nice bright spots of it was that the shoreside crowds were so gracious and generous. The Aussies were the most amazing hosts. And this is literally looking just off the boat coming in after a day of practicing a racing. One of the things the Aussies loved was our sacrilegious nature, including the fact that we had a bumper sticker that said, we don't just want the cup, we want the whole damn island. And the Aussies, who are the most fun of all, folks, they really liked that a whole bunch about the Golden Gate Challenge. And we started getting press about this, as they called it, oddball danger from San Francisco. And if you read the press at the time, they literally thought we were the dangerous one because we had the real breakthrough kind of idea. And over time, at first, it seemed like the breakthrough idea was about rudder, but as you're going to see, the bulb-keeled was just as big a deal. This is when we beat New York, and we would later go on to beat San Diego, and we beat both of them. And the New York Times, Barbara Lloyd wrote this story. So, Paul, you've been in an awful lot of press in your life in sailing the America's Cup. Do you remember beating these guys in these 2 races? Can you talk a little bit about what it felt like for the Upstart Challenge for San Francisco to beat DC in 2 of the 3 trials, and then that last day in December to beat New York?
Dennis, the Stars and Stripes races we won early was because Dennis's boat was super big and heavy without sail area, the way the 12-meter rule works. And so he was oriented towards the important races in December and January. And obviously we all know the story there. His tactics and strategy worked. But the race against New York Yacht Club was huge. I put them, when we beat them, and knocked them out of the semifinals, I believe, at Tonka. And that was a big disappointment for them. What's interesting is watching the strategies of both teams. New York was funded early, and they went down. They built 2 boats right away, and they did buddy. They ran out of gas. They started fast and couldn't finish, and we were the opposite. We were struggling and our act together and coming on strong. So the crossover was in the 3rd round robin, and the funny story there was that when we were sailing in, and Tom said we knew the backers of 2 of the big backers of our yacht club was Oil Pitts and East, and they had backed us in the Defender Trade 4 years before. So we were training with them, and of course their boat was out of the race. So Tom says, "Hey, let's get some of those hats, put it on, okay, over the USA and put the Fort Worth Boat Club Longhorn, logo on there with a felt pen when we go to the press conference tonight, so we can raise some money. And you can see we did that. But Tom with those, I be Lee, I don't know if you remember the next slide. They might have. You go. Tom.
This next slide shows the first race of the semis.
So between, Paul brings up a good point, between rounds 2 and 3, what we did is we went into the boatyard and we took the keel off and we lowered the keel to change our draft. And then we decided we were so all in, instead of putting blocks in to fill the keel bolts, we just took the boys and we poured lead in and filled it up so it was never going to come off again. But that difference in lowering the entire bulb, whatever it did, 20 or 30 millimeters, and what that did to our riding moment and pushed us real close to the limits on the mass capabilities, but was enough to get us in to be more competitive in that third round.
And so remember this race, I think I might have taken this picture off of Treasure Lady, but I remember this moment when we round first and DC's behind us. And you remember what Tom says? He turns like this and says, you were in the boat when he says, "See you later, fat man."
I wouldn't recall.
Exactly. That was a very fateful thing to say, because that was the last moment in any race in the semifinals when we were in front of Dennis Conner. he did not take kindly to hearing those words. So
I remember when Gary, we weren't really a contender, and we were getting better and better. And finally, Gary came over after winning one of the races with his ESPN crew. "Can you get me on the boat?" And I says, "Yeah, I'm pretty sure we can do that." And then Gary did a very nice interview with Tom sailing in one day on ESPN, which kind of set the tone that we're in a different place than we were for the first couple of months in Australia.
And also they asked a real key question. They said, "Can we put cameras on your boat?" They had earlier asked Dennis, and Dennis said no. "Lisa, come on up." And so we basically thought about it for a second. We had like a 1-minute discussion, Tom and I, and we both said absolutely put cameras on our boat. So Lisa, pick up the ball from there.
Well, and hi, Paul and Gary and Hank. This is really fun to be here. Thank you, Ron and Kenny. So I was a senior at Stanford and got college credit for going down and working for ESPN and for Gary. That was also another ragtag crew. It was only 8 years old, ESPN at that time. And they were prototyping the little cameras that we now just have come to see. We have them on our own with GoPros, but they were wanting to put them on the boats. And Dennis, being Dennis, didn't want anyone on his boat. He didn't want cameras on his boat. And so Dad said, "Sure, come on board." And they were able to prototype the cameras, and that was the beginning of that great revolution in how we were able to watch sailing and ultimately other sports.
Exactly. And so ESPN first had one under the gooseneck showing aft, and we said, "No, you can have a second one," looking forward at the crew. And that really, DC didn't want that at all, because he didn't want to go and give away any advantages, but it actually opened the door for coverage of sailboat racing, and Gary exploited that opportunity like crazy and did these amazing telecasts from Australia. And we would stay in the Bay Area. People would stay up until 2 in the morning watching the America's Cup racing off of Fremantle. Gary, talk a little bit about that pioneering move that you guys did with us down there.
Well, I'll always be grateful for Tom allowing us to put the camera on the boat. And I think once USA had it, Dennis had to do it too. And it did certainly change the direction of sailing, that we could see what was going on and we could hear what was being talked about. And it's pretty exciting stuff. And Lisa was a big help at that time. And I think you're accurate. We were a little bit of a ragtag group, as you described it, putting it all together. But then America's Cup launched ESPN. As Lisa pointed out, it was formed in 1979, 8 years earlier. And the commissioner of the National Football League at the time, Pete Rozelle, was watching those shows. He had a big power boat. And he said, "My God, if these guys can do this with this sailboat race, surely they could do a football game in a field that's 100 yards long. And that's how ESPN got to the NFL, and it helped me stay at ESPN for a lot of years after that. So it was a great thing, and that onboard camera made the difference.
You can see in this picture here, this is a picture of USA 61 after it got recycled and into Newport Shipyard in Newport, Rhode Island. The aft rudder, if you look at the size of the aft rudder there, that is the difference between the design and actual, where we had a lot more drag to make it work compared to the original rudders. If we could have got the lift out of the original rudder design, then we could have had smaller rudders with less drag and the no equation.
Shorter cord length if we could have.
So, and this kind of has to do with the balance problem of the boat, and it's kind of the whole theme of a lot of how these boats are. And the only way we could fix it was by putting bigger rudders on. And if we had some more time, there's another way around that problem today that probably would have got us. I don't know if it would have won the cup, but might have got us for another round.
So as a result of what happened there, in the 92 Cup, we're going to cross right over the catamaran adventure with the big boat. But in the 92 Cup, when they went back to monohulls, virtually everybody had bulb-keels. The Kiwis experimented even with a bow-rudder, middle rudder, two rudders, and a weight across the bottom, as you can see here. And they were very fast and were doing really well until our buddy Paul Cayard, sailing for Almora di Venezia at the time. I was working for Bill Koch at the time, and Cayard protested their bowsprit. And Paul, can you take it from there? You told me you stayed up all night before the protest. Tell us about how you basically prevailed in this circumstance.
Yeah, I don't want to make it too long. We protested the bowsprit. The rule was simple. The rule allowed a bowsprit to exert downward pressure on the spinnaker pole, but the Kiwis were flying the tack of their spinnaker through the bowsprit. So we were able to just show that because they were a front runner, and because of various politics, it took 4 nights of explaining to convince the jury, even though we had photographic evidence. But anyway, we prevailed, and yeah, that put their whole camp in a bit of a tizzy, I think, and started to spin them out, and we...
You helmsman, all that.
What's that?
Russell Coots gets bounced, and Rod comes on as helmsman. They change the whole program. Yeah.
Other way around.
What's important about that picture, though, both of those rudders turn, or whatever those things are.
Yeah.
And so the bearing, think about the load, the side force load and the bearing in the bulb. It was an incredible piece of engineering, and probably the right concept in getting the lifting surfaces movable and off the bow of the boat.
Right. So this is directly derivative. And as Paul was saying, so Rod Davis was driving and Russell Coots got this shot because of Paul's really savvy move here. So we then, Alberto then went to build another prototype out of a Hobie 33, and this became, he's working for Dennis Conner at the time, and it became their prototype. And this shows you a little boat like the Soling. This shows kind of what it basically looked like in prototype mode. And as you can see, by 95, everybody was doing bolt keels. So there wasn't any question. And take a look on this next slide. This is the winning Kiwi boat, Kiwi Magic in 95. And this boat, look at, this has basically got an incredibly long bulb underneath it. So bulbs were catching on. The J105 had a form of a bulb keel, and then the Melgis 24 originally, and then 32, and then 20, and then 40, and then 37. All of them have bulb keels. And this is a picture of Alberto. So one day he calls me up and says, come to San Diego real quick. So I get on an airplane and I go down there and I get on this boat that's being dropped in the water with Billy Burns and Matt Brown. And he hands me this electronic thing. And I did not see the boat. They were trying to hide it so it would go in the water. And I push a button and the boat starts to tip over. And this is the prototype of the first canting keel boat. Because Alberto, constantly dreaming up ideas, said, as soon as you have a bow rudder and a bulb keel, what if I cant the keel up to weather? That's way better than 20 guys on the rail. This is an amazing mechanical problem, as everybody who's built bow-ruddered boats and canting keel boats since then has discovered. Paul, in 2005, gets the call to be the around-the-world skipper on an amazing Disney boat. Paul, talk a little bit about going around the world with one of these creatures.
What was the first round-the-world race with canting keels? Well, at least the Whitbread version. I'm not sure where the Imancas were at that time with canting keels or not. Probably not. But yeah, we had a lot of growing pains. We broke the rams, titanium rams. We broke the foundations, and as you can imagine, so those bulbs weighed about 6.5 tons. The whole boat weighed 13 tons. The bulbs weighed 6.5, and they were down 4 meters, and they canted 40 degrees. So the top speed we hit was 40 knots. So you can imagine flying through the Southern Ocean, let's say at 30, bouncing off 5-meter waves and landing, down 15 feet with that kind of force, and having a 6.5-ton bulb basically hanging out to the side of the boat. The loads were astronomical, and it was just a big learning curve. And frankly, one boat did sink and one person did die in that race, but frankly, it's a miracle there wasn't more damage.
Paul, the issue with those boats was there was no limit of penalty on bulb weight, so every kilo you saved in the boat could go in the bulb.
Exactly, which also was the 12, all those rules didn't limit the amount of weight you could put in the bulb. So yeah, better boat building and better engineering yielded more riding moment.
So the race was on then. People, fast boats, fast monohulls were rapidly adopting this technology. Now that you've got a bulb keel and a forward foil, you can basically sail these monohulls super, super, super fast. And the bigger boats started adopting them too. So pretty soon you've got 100-footers with canting keels, racing around the world. And all this time, Alberto's trying to kind of still make a living. And so he's showing his drawings around, and he's got a little team around him. And Chuck Robinson, former Deputy Secretary of State under Kissinger, who became a friend of ours in the challenge, he basically helps fund Alberto to create Dyna yachts. And Peter, the very smart Peter Iser, comes by and he says, I've got some ideas about how we can make this into a one design class. And lo and behold, Shock 40s are born. And these are super fast, canting keel, one design creatures. That's not to say that there's a lot of maintenance with a bulb. There's a lot of maintenance with a canting keel or a bow rudder. But, they were even named for Boat of the Year by Sailing World. The last slide.
So there's one of Scotty's projects here on Pyewacket. The difference, so Ron and I were preparing for this, the bow rudder is important, but it's the bulb that's probably one of the biggest advantages in the things that got carried on in design in future sailboats after 61. But the difference is that the 12-minute rule had a big penalty for draft. And there was also something called the chain girth, which is the depth of the middle of the boat. So the exposed fin length was not very big. Because of that, you needed the big rudders, fore and aft, to deal with the side loads. Here what happens is a classic example of when you can have any draft you want and get enough lifting surface out of the keel fin, then you can have these very small foils, which are the most hydrodynamic or aerodynamic ways to go. So it's a pretty nice solution. And those boats that Scott's been around have been
Scotty?
successful.
Walter, give Scotty the mic. Scotty, come up and talk to us, please, a little bit about, you've basically been one of the facilitators of the Wacket program forever. Tell people what it's like to sail in this kind of a boat with a candy keel and a forward foil, etc.
I was part of building that boat in Auckland in about 2003, I think it was, and it was this was almost a horrific mistake. Roy Disney wanted to build a boat like DeVos had, which was a water ballasted. The bulb weighed 40,000 pounds. We actually started the design process. Gary Weissman said, hey, you guys got to come to Australia and sail on this new boat, Wild Oats, which was only a 66-footer at the time. And they went down, they sailed on the boat, they said, scrap the new boat, stop the design process now. And we started to build that boat, which is the canteen keel version of a Maxi 86. The bulb on that thing weighed less than 16,000 pounds. The bulb on the other boat was close to 40,000 pounds. And the numbers that I got, since I was in charge of building all the rigging for that boat, the numbers that I was getting from the design office at Rankelpew were completely off. They thought the loads were going to be much higher than they actually were. And so the mast was overbuilt, the lines were overbuilt, everything was overbuilt. And so as soon as we started sailing it, it was just an absolute dream to sail on this boat that wasn't loaded up, that was sitting up on top of the water rather than pushing the entire ocean to Hawaii. And it was just a phenomenal boat, and we almost made a multi-million-dollar mistake by building a conventional hull. We learned a lot about front rudders with that boat, and including going to Hawaii, we would just pull a pin on the front rudder and just let it float. We didn't need it at all, so we just didn't want it to cause drag as the bow was moving back and forth, so we just let it float. That is the boat that Transpac a few years ago, we discovered that the rule was actually wasn't right, and it was showing that the larger the boat got, the slower your rating got. So we took that boat. Roy was very passionate about the Transpac and the record, and we went after the record, and we literally cut that boat in half. We cut it in half right in front of the chain plates, and we very secretly had a whole new bow section made in New Zealand at Cookson's, and they sent it up. I don't know if they flew it up or trucked it up, however they got it here. And we very quietly put the new bow section on the boat and made it about 100 feet long. Put a much bigger mast in it, a much deeper bulb, put wings on the boat to get the stability that we were looking for in order to support the bigger mast. That was 1K. You can imagine how it went. We had issues. The biggest issue we had was we did all this work. Reportedly, it was about $8 million to do this, and we got a really bad weather pattern that year, and we didn't break the record. And we ruined a perfectly boat in the process. Because when you cut a boat in half, it's not going to be as strong as it was before you cut it in half. And so the boat, last I saw, was sitting up at Schooner Creek Boat Works under a plastic cover up there, and is owned by a gentleman in Hong Kong.
Thank you, Scotty.
That's the pie wagon.
So now, that's our last slide, and we're open for questions in the audience. Walter, hold the mic up. Anybody has a question, you can ask anybody in the crew, anybody who's here, including Steve the Bone Taft, who is making the sales in San Francisco. Looks like Lisa got a question. Don't point it yet.
What would you have needed now in hindsight? What would you have needed besides money? Was it just time, or what would have the outcome have been if you'd had more?
Yeah, I think 8 to 12 weeks would have been invaluable. Another front rudder would have been invaluable. And yeah, we're learning, as you know, we're learning every day, and we just needed more time and a little bit more money, but mainly more time.
Don't aim the mic at the speaker, please. So to finish answering that question, so the rudders were on carbon fiber spars, And the carbon fiber spars that I got from Hercules Aerospace, Magnum, Utah. And to get in, and we had one spare, and we broke a rudder one time. And before that, we had gone to Phil Knight, chairman of Nike, and he gave us $75,000. We made an articulating foil, literally when they changed like an airplane wing. And that got constructed and put in a box, and it was on Alberto's driveway when we broke the rudder down south. And Tommy said, "Uh-oh, we can't try this. We can't use this potentially in the Simmons or whatever. So we just have to go with what we have." We basically believe that if we had about 7, 8, 9 more weeks, our learning curve and our advances in speed were such that we probably could have won the doggone cup. As it turned out, we were faster than DC in the beginning of the trials. In all 3 of the trials, we won 2 or 3 of those races, but we lost in the semis. He copied first Buddy copied Steak and Kidney's keel, and then Dennis copied Buddy's keel, and he did rivets and a few other things to his boat, and that made them faster. Elaborate on how faster.
So back to kind of following Lisa's question. The reason we broke the rudder is we built a room called a poison room. And in 72 hours, we could build a rudder blade around a rudder post. So we had one spare when we got the other post, we had one spare. So we go to work on building what we thought was the next rudder size design that we thought was right. And we could do this in 72 hours. The point is the rudder post will only take so much load. And maybe we built too big of a rudder and the rudder post blew up. And then we were into that. Luckily we had that other post. And what you're talking about is the forward rudder. We had a ruling that we could have a cambered front rudder. And we just couldn't hold, we called it a nose tube, we just couldn't structurally hold it on, and we just need more time to work that out.
Exactly. Other questions?
One of the things I want to mention.
Steve Taft, Sam Commodore, help him point the, Sam, come over here, Bone. Come on here, buddy. Thank you. Steve Taft, Staff Commodore, great sailor, and our sailmaker.
One of the things,
Microphone up.
when USA went back east, I did some sailing on the boat, went back there, and the guy who owned the boat, a guy named Jan Slay, had a house in Newport, and I think you've all seen the photos of the Cadillac Ranch down in Texas where they planted all the Cadillacs like that. He had that in his backyard where he had all of the different rudders that he had, and they probably had a dozen rudders. They just kept building them and trying them. They just had them stacked up in the yard. It was
Great, Bone. Thank you. Other questions? Who else has a question? Paul Cayard, Naval Architect. Thank you, Paul.
Was there a window of time? I'm thinking.
Paul, come up here. Come in front with us, sir. Put you on the camera, please. I'm right here. Right up here.
Okay,
Up here.
does this work?
Up here, right here, please. Thanks, Paul. Stay next to Kenny.
Okay. Was there a window of time when the rules would have permitted a pure kite spinnaker? Dave Culp believes there might have been a window, and that would have been legal, and that loophole was essentially closed before it was ever tried.
That's a question for you or Bone. Bone, what do you know about that? Come on back. Forget tri-radials, forget ASAMs. What about a kite? A pure kite spinnaker, if you wouldn't mind coming up and conjecturing on Cayman's as usual. Ingenious question.
Well, I don't know anything about the kites, but one of the things that the meter boats did that nobody else did is that they were building asymmetrical spinnakers. And when we sailed the trials in Intrepid in 1974, we sailed with an asymmetrical spinnaker on the boat. They just called it a Jenniker back then.
Yeah. I always track of that. You're right. There was an ASAM then. There was a Jenniker.
I think the rule, though, basically in those days said it had to have 3 corners. But I don't think you could have 4 corners. And so if you were going to build, I mean, I don't know enough about it, but you had to have a certain girth requirement, only maximum, and in 3 corners, right? Is
3 quarters wouldn't have been a problem, I don't think.
They were cuts with 3 quarters. Yeah. Okay, great.
Nobody thought that far ahead.
it might have only been able to be attached to the spinnaker bowl.
What's that?
It might have been tension.
It was attached with a spinnaker pole.
No, I mean, it might by the rule. Other than jibing, it had to be attached to the spinnaker pole.
Any other questions? So we should, thank you guys. We should also mention that all this couldn't have happened had we not gotten $8.7 million in 19 months, which is what we raised. And we should say thank you to Pacific Telesis. They gave us $1 million. I'll tell you a funny story about that. So we earlier, like the challenge before Tom and I became part of it, and before we brought Kenny on, had gotten an official letter from Pacific Telesis that had just spun off of AT&T, and the official letter said, no donation will come from us. We don't want to give you any money. And so I searched around for a big name guy after I become general manager to help us, and I picked Cyril Magnet. And I go meet with Cyril, and he's 86, and he knows everybody on the planet. And he says, okay, well, I have meetings. And he sets up literally meetings with CEOs, every big company in San Francisco. And we go and we meet with Pacific Telesis. And in the meeting with Pacific Telesis, I sort of accidentally, deliberately, slightly accidentally mentioned AT&T.
That's the way that's.
And Art Latno is his telephone receptionist at Latno. Art Latno and Don Gwynn, they kind of look like this. After the meeting, we get in this old elevator. It's a squeaky door elevator at 144 New Montgomery, their headquarters. And the door isn't even closed. And Cyril, he's where Kenny is, and he goes, ah, and he jabs me with his elbow in my ribs. He said, that's it. That's the secret right there. And I looked at him. AT&T. That's it. We got to get to AT&T. You got to get a meeting with AT&T. And I say, Cyril, you just came from these guys who you love. They love you. Everything is wonderful. And you're basically going to go directly to their competitor. And the 86-year-old Cyril Magnet said, absolutely. So I set up a meeting in New York City on Madison Avenue at their big ivory headquarters. And I meet with the VP of marketing up on like the 20-something floor. And we talk about who knows what, but we don't, they have no interest. But I don't say that. So we have a meeting 2 weeks or so later at Pacific Telesis, and at the meeting, I again slip a little bit about AT&T, and they look at me and they say, wait, you've had conversations with AT&T? I said, yeah. So when? I said, well, last Thursday. Where? New York City. Where? 615 Madison, or 615 Fifth was at Fifth Avenue. And well, who'd you meet with? And I tell them who it is. Yeah, up in the 24th floor. And they look at each other, and right there on the spot, in front of Cyril and Blackaller, they say, well, what does it take to get an option? And I said, first money in is the money we'll take. And they said, what about an option? I said, first money in, I can't decide anything better for the child than first money in. So they said, well, we're very serious. And I said, well, can you meet the number? Said, they looked at each other, $1 million? Oh yeah, we can meet the number. So they were so happy that we did what we said we would do. Thanks to Kitty and all the team, we did do an E1 and we did do an R1. That in August, when I'm still scrapping for dough, I organize another meeting, and Tom and I go up and I meet with Lackno and Gwen, and I say, they say, hi, how you doing? I say, well, we would like to talk to you about a bonus. And I brought these five binders of news clippings from all around the world with their big spinnakers, their logos on the spinnaker. And I say, I think we've earned it. He said, what do you mean? I said, well, and I show the 5 binders, and I say, so you've gotten this much press, and the rate card value of that press, or advertising, and blah, 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 blah. So I think we earn a good bonus. And Don Gwynn pushes a button, calls his assistant, says, bring in Moberg and the binders. Jim Moberg at Pacific Telesis comes in. I meet this guy. He's got 12 binders. They have more clipping around the world. We just had clipping that I could get a big as clipping. And he looks at us and says, what are you thinking about? And I have no idea what I'm going to say. So I say, $500,000. They look at each other. Yes. We get in the elevator. We go, Blackaller. I can't believe what you did. I can't believe they're not going to give us the money. I can't believe it. But they did. So it tells you part of the game is you got to ask, because I can't say yes or no until you ask. Anyway, Tommy was an inspirationally good buddy and leader, and all of you guys who made the Golden Gate Challenge such an incredibly, first of all, adventurous learning experience and a pioneering effort. As you've seen, the bulb-keeled that we innovated and the bow-ruddered that you've some effort out to make has been broadly adopted around the world.
Just kind of going on the theme of team, and it takes everybody. Tom obviously did a great job at assembling a team, but one story, we were building 49 in Stockton. And when you build a metal boat, you do your welding coupons first, and Lloyd comes and inspects them, and we x-ray them, and everything is fine. And I'm staying there, and the project's going just fine. We don't know that the welder turns down the heat on the machine, so we get less warpage until we get the boat built. And the boat doesn't pass x-ray. So it's a big problem. So Blackaller's not really very happy. So he says, Kenneth, we got the wrong people in the wrong spot. Harry, what do you want to do? Well, next time, you send Hank the jig steward up there. We x-ray the night before. Hank will check the x-rays, and then Hank will present them to Lloyd's. And Hank maybe, edited some of the x-rays that didn't look so good, being an x-ray expert, reading it. And that's how 49 got through, using the best people for the best task.
Gary, any last comments you want to make, and or Paul and Hank?
Well, the scary thing is that this all happened quite a long time ago. We're talking about 40 years ago. And here we are still standing, talking about it, which means his legacy is going to live on for a long time. It was a real pleasure to be invited today, so thank you all.
Thank you, Gary Jobson. Hank the jig steward, any closing thoughts before we go to Paul?
Yeah, I would just echo Gary's sentiment. It's been 40 plus years that I've known Gary, and it's been a great relationship. In the last couple of years, our friendship has grown even more, and I can't thank them all enough for that. And they're boats made of aluminum, and they're wooden ships and fiberglass ships, but the best ships we have in this business are friendships. So thank you all very much.
Hank the jig steward,
And very good jig.
and our great leader, Paul Cayard. Paolo.
Well, as I said in the beginning, I'm sorry I wasn't there with you all in person. It sounds like a great reunion. It did occur to me, and maybe this is something that Dr. Healy's boss can keep in mind, but the 40th anniversary of the Golden Gate Challenge will be on the 100th birthday of the St. Francis Yacht Club.
87 of our being down there, yes. Great, thanks very much, everybody. It's been lots of fun for us to put this on. Kenny, thanks so much for sharing the podium, buddy. Good, everybody. Perfect. And with that, we adjourn the Wednesday Yachting Luncheon in a bell.
This has been a presentation of the Wednesday Yachting Luncheon.